Hey, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show. You one-stop shop for all things Commanders. It is a Fantasy Football Friday. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe, hit that notification button so that you never miss an episode like today's episode with Theo Greminger. Theo, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Doug.
Absolutely. Your first time on the show. We like to get to know folk a little bit. So we'll just start right off by how are we here now? How did you get into the business?
Yeah, so I actually had a start in fantasy. Everybody's like, I'm a player. I was a player first, but I was really a player first. I had some success with a couple of the high stakes formats. I ended up being asked to sort of write something, and then it turned into podcasting, and it just sort of took off for me. I was with Player Profiler for a number of years, and then this year I did a little work with Fantasy Points, and that turned into a full-time thing, which is going really, really well. Really happy to be part of that team over there. So yeah, just sort of an interesting run. I still am playing a lot, but the content creation has been something that was a little bit later in life for me than some people, and it just sort of really took off. It was just a big fit for me. So happy to be doing it, and happy to be talking to people like you every single week about the game we love, and helping people find an edge in fantasy football is something that I take a lot of pride in.
Lead analyst for Fantasy Points. What does that entail for you?
A lot of podcasting. I'm putting out multiple podcasts a week. I do the Fantasy Football Daily podcast, which is dropping like 3 times a week. Dynasty Life for your Dynasty listeners. We cover a ton of Dynasty content over there. That's about once a week. And then School of Scott, I co-host with Scott Barrett, who's one of the sharpest guys in the industry, also from Fantasy Points. So that show's going very, very well. We just did our 2 positional breakdowns. We broke down quarterbacks this week with JJ Zachariason, and we broke down running backs with Pat Kerrane. We'll do probably multiple wide receiver episodes just because there's so many players to cover, and we have a tight end episode coming up. So trying to get you ready for your drafts there. And then articles, dropping a number of articles that can help fantasy managers win. Did a big zero and hero RB target list article that's dropping pretty soon. If you're choosing to go with a zero RB approach, I sort of have you covered from round 5 on. And if you're anchoring with a Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Saquon in round 1, and then you want to hold up and sort of punt RB2, a number of RB2 candidates for you in that article that's coming out. Dynasty rankings, I'm also actively involved with over at Fantasy Points. We have a big Dynasty rankings update. And then we also have I did drop my top 50 redraft rankings. That has a big update coming out. That's going to be available probably next week. So yeah, check out Fantasy Points. Check out all my podcasts.
You prefer writing or podcasting?
I like them both. And I think like that was one thing
Cheating.
where, yeah, it's cheating, but I like them both. I think that writing, sometimes you can sound smarter and more organized, but I think podcasting helps you stay on your feet and be able to react. I like them both, and I think that I have people who read my work. I have people who watch me on YouTube. I have people who consume my podcast, and I think being available in multiple platforms really, really helps you. A lot of times with younger content creators, especially nowadays, when I was at Player Profiler, I was the director of fantasy content, so doing a little more hiring and stuff. And I would always encourage people, if you're really good at TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, you should also write. And if you're a writer, maybe a little bit uncomfortable, you've got to get out of your comfort zone and actually get on tape. I think you'll be more confident. The more you do things in life, the more better you get at them. But if you are somebody who's a little shy, get behind that camera, start sharing your fantasy football ideas or your NFL ideas, as well as putting them on paper, and it's going to make you more well-rounded in your thought process.
I completely agree. Do you tend to be a zero or a hero guy?
I'm neutral. I've had big wins over the years. I think hero's sort of been a strategy that worked for a number of years. Shout out to the Go Bills guys who won the FFPC main event in back-to-back years. Those guys are great guys, great drafters. They went hero RB. B-Bag Batoba, a good friend of mine, he's won the 350 FFPC contest multiple times. He's sort of been fluid in his drafting approach as well. Last year, running back was a really powerful start for a lot of managers. I think you don't want to go into a draft saying, no matter what, I'm executing this strategy. You want things to come to you. You want to attack edges. You want to have the best possible build. But if you're in a league where people are overvaluing a specific position, you can punish them by attacking it a different way. So I think every fantasy football draft is different, and it's pick the best edge type pick, know when the runs are coming. Plenty of rules that I follow, but none of them is I have to be dogmatic in a specific approach every single draft. I think that gets you in trouble.
Is that the biggest mistake that the novice, that the average fantasy manager makes, is by putting in too much thought to how they want the draft to go before it starts?
Yeah, I think that not being able to, I think being sort of a slave to ADP can get a lot of fantasy managers in trouble. I think you going into a draft and being unwilling to reach at times, unwilling to take a value when it slides to you at times. There's a lot of ways to lose a fantasy football draft, but certainly going into it saying, I have to get this guy here, I have to get this guy here, that can get people in trouble. Getting your guys is great, but you have to be able to adjust and react to the values that are presented to you each time you're on the clock. I think this year specifically, one thing that I've told everybody sort of a way to find an edge is have a quarterback plan. If you want to draft Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, those guys, you kind of know when you need to pick them because of ADP. And also it's sort of a cascade where one manager takes Lamar or Josh Allen, and then the other two, the quarterbacks go off the board. And then a few picks go by, and then you see Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow get selected. But there's a gap between QB5 on this year. And then once you get into that, Patrick Mahomes sort of is his own little universe where the fantasy scoring hasn't really been there like we were used to with early career Patrick Mahomes, but he's still Patrick Mahomes. There's still enthusiasm for him. Then when you get into that QB7 through like QB15, it's pretty flat, and a lot of people are sort of going and getting their guys, but you don't necessarily know when the run's going to happen. I think if you're going to go early quarterback, that's fine. But if you are not going to embrace that early quarterback strategy, then have a plan of about what round I want to attack the quarterback spot, and be open-minded to a few different quarterbacks at different times. You're a Justin Fields guy, you're a Bo Nix guy. Just kind of understand where to get them. And I think quarterback this year could get people in trouble if they don't have a plan. Tight ends probably similar this year because Bowers and McBride are extremely steamed up. Kittle's sort of in his own little universe. And then Laporta exists at tight end 4, but he's had a huge drop-off from last season in the ADP price tag. And then after that, it's just like quarterback. You see a sort of a wide range of tight end 5 through tight end 11, tight end 12, 13 even, where people don't necessarily have their favorite guy. I think if you go in with a plan for the one-off positions, everything sort of works itself out, and it allows you to really attack running back and tight end and running back and wide receiver this year.
It can make the skin crawl a little bit, but I have done enough of the best balls this offseason that if you can be patient, it feels like you can build a really good team and then sneak like Kyler Murray or Matthew Stafford in and should be able to feel fairly good about yourself.
Yeah, I think that best ball this year, one of the edges has been those, especially if we're talking about underdog, where the 3 quarterback build is, I think, really strong this year. There's a lot of price corrections on quarterbacks that we know are talented players that didn't deliver last year, and I think the market is punishing them. A guy like CJ Stroud last year, we wanted him to sort of be the next one. We were drafting at QB5, QB6 price tags. He didn't deliver. This year, new offensive coordinator change. I think they're going to be a little more pass happy. I love the value of CJ Stroud in best ball. You get him around QB 20. And like you said, Matt Stafford, very cheap. Matt Stafford, you're going to get at the bottom of the barrel, QB 2 range. Kyler Murray's cheap. So yeah, if you're willing to go with a 3 QB build, you don't even need to really start your quarterback process on underdog until, round 7, round 8. Take your Purdy, take your Caleb Williams, and then you can back it up with the kind of guys you mentioned. And I like dirt cheap Geno Smith. Geno Smith's in a situation where the market is completely pushing him to the side. We like Chip Kelly. We like Pete Carroll. We think it's going to be rational coaching in Vegas. Offensive lines improve there. They have a fantastic running back in Ashton Genty, the best tight end in football in Brock Bowers, and a very functional wide receiver. Like technically a wide receiver 2, but a wide receiver 1 in their offense, Jacoby Myers, and then a couple of younger players at wide receiver in Deontay Thornton and Jack Besh that I think could be effective players for them, not necessarily for fantasy, but for moving the needle of the offense. So Geno's in a really good spot, and he's never finished in this sort of range as a starter. They gave him $66 million guaranteed, and you're able to get him in high-end QB3 range. So I've liked Geno in those 3 QB starts. He's pretty free right now.
Are you as high on Ashton Genty as the rest of the community is?
So it's funny. I had an Ashton Genty take this week on Fantasy Football Daily. I did 2 FFPC main events so far. And Ashton Genty fell to me at the 202.
Okay.
It just feels like Ashton Genty at that price tag is a fantastic value. And I understand that he's getting punished right now because Christian McCaffrey is steamed up in ADP. He's healthy. The vibes for McCaffrey are strong. And if McCaffrey stays healthy the whole year, we've seen what a ceiling case can be for McCaffrey. He's one of the best in football. And then you also have Devon Achane moving up. I like him a lot. Derrick Henry, people know he's going to be there in the second round for him. And they know Jonathan Taylor is going to be there at the 2-3 turn. So Genty's sort of fallen into this range where during the draft process, I know you have a lot of smart people coming on this podcast. Like we were talking about Ashton Genty, like a Saquon Barkley level prospect, the potential to have Zeke Elliott like rookie season production, Barkley rookie season production. And we're actually having to pay Najee Harris rookie season ADP value for him recently. So it's kind of a funny parallel that Genty has one of the most valuable players in football in Dynasty, but in redraft, he's sort of just fallen into this range. I do think when you look at Genty, he's one of the best bets in the NFL to get unbelievable rushing volume this year. And there's not a back on that offense that scares you as a pass catcher. So Genty's going to have two-way ability in that offense. And like, I'm not sure what the odds are right now, but he'd be one of the 2 or 3 players if we had to say which running back has the most touches in football. Like he's going to have a Bijan Robinson-like touch numbers, maybe higher than Bijan. I could see if it's working, Chip Kelly running a fast-paced offense with a lot of carries for Genty. So I think Genty's just a really good value right now when you're only having to pay a 1-2 turn price tag, sometimes early second round price tag for him.
You mentioned Chip Kelly, so I'll pivot here to offensive coordinators. Same thing could have been said for Cliff Kingsbury, and we saw how that worked last year, but we haven't really seen Chip Kelly move the needle on an offense. Like, yeah, he was at Ohio State, but I mean, come on, there was an NFL team they had there. So like, what makes you feel like Chip Kelly's the guy that really drives the truck here?
Well, I think that a lot of times when it's sort of a funny way of looking at it, but whenever you have a fan base collectively just heartbroken about losing someone, you should pay attention. And Ohio State offensive coordinator, that's one of the best jobs in football, period. You're in a situation where you're coaching pros, not only on your starters, but your backups and your third stringers are all pros. And Chip Kelly could have stayed at Ohio State until he wanted to retire and made a ton of money doing so. He took the challenge to go back to the NFL. And I think it's a double bet with Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly and 2 coaches who are a little bit older right now, who are seeing this as a situation where they can both have a great success. And there was one time where Chip Kelly was looked at as sort of a genius when he first came when he was at New Hampshire, when he was at Oregon, when he was at Philadelphia. Like when he was a younger coach, this is a guy that was doing innovative things on a football field. It sort of fell apart for him late in his career in the NFL, bounced around, goes to UCLA, had some success there. But Ohio State last year, I mean, they had a first-year quarterback. They win the national title. Things didn't necessarily go their way, but that offense was humming. And I think Chip Kelly's seeing this as a real challenge. And I think Pete Carroll had a plan coming back to the NFL to bring Chip Kelly. So with Chip Kelly, I do think that they'll run a pretty fast-paced offense. So like we bring up Cliff Kingsbury. Cliff Kingsbury offenses, they have always been pretty fantasy-friendly because they run a lot of plays. I think we'll get that with Chip Kelly. I think that Chip Kelly, the book has not fully been written about him. Could he be a genius again? I mean, you were a genius at one point. Is it like riding a bike? So maybe I think Chip Kelly certainly picked and chose this job for himself. And Hey, we'll see really quickly, but I'm optimistic about Chip Kelly.
Bigger impact fantasy wise, Ben Johnson leaving the Lions or joining the Bears?
Joining the Bears. I think that the Detroit has too good of an offensive line and too good of top shelf talent to completely fall off.
Okay.
I think that Detroit could naturally regress a little bit, but there's a certain point where that's a well-oiled machine. I think Jahmyr Gibbs might be the most talented back in football. Amon-Ra St. Brown's an absolute dog. I think Jameson Williams could have his best season as a pro, and Sam Laporta is very talented. They lose Frank Ragnow, but this is an organization that continually drafts linemen very highly in the NFL draft. They'll be fine. We have them as a top 5 ranked offensive line in our offensive line rankings at Fantasy Points right now. But if you look at what Ben Johnson was able to accomplish, I mean, Ben Johnson is one of the smartest guys we've seen in football. How he was able to resurrect Jared Goff, the offensive balance that he had. And from a fantasy football production, the guy was just an ATM machine for fantasy football scoring. Multiple running backs finishing as RB2 or better each and every year. He had 2 running backs who were fantasy football scorers, like the Jamal Williams season, where he led the NFL in rushing touchdowns, the ascension of Amon-Ra St. Brown. He was the first offensive coordinator to oversee a rookie tight end, finishing as the tight end 1 overall in fantasy football. Ben Johnson is creative. He's aggressive. And the guy just seems like sort of a rule breaker at the offensive coordinator position. And we're going to see what Caleb Williams is really quickly with Ben Johnson, because he was able to really turn around Jared Goff, your perception of Jared Goff. People thought Jared Goff might get benched. And then Ben Johnson comes along, and Jared Goff is been set in Detroit, winning games. So I love what they did in the draft, getting Colston Loveland, getting Luther Burden, and then you have DJ Moore, you have Roma Dunze, and the offensive line's getting better in Chicago as well. They made a bunch of investments on the interior of the offensive line, and I think with quarterbacks that are not that tall, NFL teams have seen that as a way to sort of speed up the process. Carolina did it last year. Dave Canales gets hired in Carolina. They bring in a bunch of interior linemen. Bryce Young, second half of the year, looked much better. Caleb Williams is interesting this year because I really loved him as a prospect coming out. There's a chance that he's going to be more of a quarterback that thrives on kind of the low ADOT looks, but they're tailor-made to do that if they want to with all these weapons over the field. Colston Loveland can be really effective in the middle of the field. DJ Moore obviously has been very strong the last 2 years. I love Luther Burden. I think that this is an offense that could take off really quickly. And I know Bears fans always have like this self-deprecation and they never trust it. But I think this could actually be the guy to get it going in Chicago. I love Ben Johnson. I mean, how could you not love Ben Johnson? I felt like I was writing about him every single week as this genius. And I think it could happen in Chicago pretty quickly.
The same question could then be asked about Tampa Bay and Jacksonville. Who gets the bigger bump there?
I think Josh Grizzard is an interesting guy. I think that he's in terms of like continuity, Grizzard is in a really good situation. We talk about offensive line quality. Tampa Bay has it. Tristan Wirfs is going to miss some time. Obviously, that really hurts them, but he'll eventually be back. They add Emeka Egbuka to an offense that already had really strong weapons at wide receiver. They re-sign Chris Godwin. Baker Mayfield's completely in his comfort zone now, had over 40 passing touchdowns last year. Bucky Irving, obviously very dynamic two-way player, and they have depth at the running back position. So I think Josh Grizzard, there's a lot less pressure on him. Grizzard just has to sort of do what Liam Cohen did last year, maybe have his own little twist to it. They say they want to have more big plays downfield. That was something we saw last year with Cohen, where they wanted more big plays out of the running game. So it seems like Grizzard wants to take that to another level. But Tampa Bay's sort of in a good spot. Jacksonville, though, Liam Cohen could be a real franchise changer here. Gladstone, the GM, is also interesting, where I think they're really valuing hyper athletic players who can make big plays. Obviously, the Travis Hunter selection, that was a big push the chips in type move for them. They lose their 2026 first round pick to go get Hunter. And the Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter wide receiver pairing, that's phenomenal. I think that's going to work out really well. But going and getting guys like Bashal Tutin, getting these explosive, fast players on that offense, I think that's something we're going to see more of in Jacksonville. A lot of pressure on Trevor Lawrence. We're going to see what Trevor Lawrence really is, though. Like, Trevor Lawrence, this is year 5 for him. Is he good? I think we'll find out pretty quickly. That year 2 for Trevor Lawrence was a really good season for him. It's been a lot of sort of really unimpactful play from him, but Cohen could be the one to really get a lot out of him. So I think in terms of like pressure, and there's a lot like less pressure on Grizzard. Just do the same thing. Cohen, though, this is a guy where he could end up taking that offense and really, really moving it upwards.
How do you sort out teams? I think of like the Texans. We were talking about the Bears, the Eagles, where you have a bunch of really good, talented weapons on offense. How do you sort them out so that you're not banging your head against the wall when you pick the wrong guy for fantasy purposes?
I think with Philadelphia, that it's a team where I think everybody's probably priced pretty well.
Mhm.
They're consolidated enough as an offense that they're easy to predict. We know Jalen Hurts at QB5 is a price tag, QB4 or QB5, depending on your format. That's not a price tag that's going to get you in trouble. I think Jalen Hurts is going to deliver around those numbers or better. AJ Brown is priced correctly this year, where you're able to get AJ in the back half of the second round. The pass volume was really, really low last year in Philly. I think if there's just a little bit more natural variance and games are a little tighter for them, things don't come as easy for them this year. You could see AJ Brown actually getting more targets this year. Devonta Smith's an easy click where he goes as well. He's not going to win you your league, but he's definitely not going to lose you your league. Where he's getting drafted now, Devonta Smith's never finished in that range in terms of points per game. You're able to get him as sort of a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. It's really Saquon. It's, do you trust Saquon to be able to deliver back-to-back seasons? I think
does his usage from last year scare you?
A little bit. People. It scares me a lot. I mean, and it's just
historically it doesn't work out well, right?
480 touches if you include the Super Bowl, and they're keeping him on ice. They're not putting anything on him now. They really like Saquon. I think they'll be very tentative with his usage in training camp. They're really saving him for the season. But when it comes to Saquon, it's just the running back competition where guys like Bijan Robinson's my pick to be RB1. And I think I'm going to have Jahmyr Gibbs ahead of Saquon in my top 50 update, which some people won't like. But I just think Gibbs, we're betting on two 23-year-olds against a 28-year-old coming off of a 480 touch season. I think with Saquon, it's just, he's phenomenal. He was so good last year, but banking on the 2,000-yard runner who was breaking off all these huge, huge plays. Saquon led the league in runs over 20 yards, led the league in runs over 40 yards. I mean, he was phenomenal on the big plays last year. You also have with Saquon, you don't have that receiving floor that he would have on other teams, where if you put Saquon on the Washington Commanders, for example, Saquon would get 55, maybe 60 catches on that offense. In Philly, if he breaks 40, that's a win, because Jalen Hurts doesn't target running backs. We didn't see DeAndre Swift get targets, and we didn't see Saquon get targets. Now, maybe that's because they're winning every game by 2 touchdowns. But we certainly know that's in the bag for Saquon. So for me, it's just an opportunity cost thing. Head to head, I don't want to take Saquon over Justin Jefferson. I don't want to take Saquon over Jamar Chase. And I don't want to take Saquon Barkley over the 2 23-year-old running backs. And then keep going a little bit further down. I think he's become sort of a value in the middle of the first round at the 5th or 6th pick, but most people watching this are not in home leagues are not going to have that opportunity. So it's Saquon at the 102, 101 or bust. And I'm probably going to pass on him in that range.
I took Bijan first in the Scott Fish Bowl and my Wimpy for going chalk.
I went Bijan with the number 2 pick in the Scott Fish Bowl. So I hope we finish 1-2 in the Scott Fish Bowl, Doug.
I agree. That would be fantastic. I find, Theo, myself drafting Cleveland Brown players. The team averaged 19 points a game last year, and 18 points a game. On paper, it looks like the offensive unit's got talent, but why do I consistently find myself drafting a Judkins or a Judy for a team that I don't know if they're going to put up points this year?
Betting on really bad offenses can pay off big in fantasy football.
Okay.
And on underdog, especially where a team like Cleveland is, the guys are all pushed down so far because there's no possible way to stack them. But last year, we talk about the bottom scoring offenses in football. Bottom scoring offenses in football last year produced the tight end 1 overall in Brock Bowers. Malik Neighbors was a top 6 scorer at the wide receiver position. Brian Thomas Jr., top 6 scorer at the wide receiver position. So there's usually with the teams that are not so good, it seems like they're a little bit easier to predict in terms of the usage for some of these players. And I don't think we necessarily do that great a job predicting the very worst offense in football. Cleveland right now is being treated like they're going to score about 12 points per game. And they have a number of guys there that I think could beat their ADPs. If there's a winner at the quarterback position, I think for fantasy football, we should be rooting for Joe Flacco, because a Joe Flacco start, and I don't think he's going to win a whole lot of games, but I think Joe Flacco could keep that fantasy offense viable, where a guy like David Njoku would return value at ADP. A guy like Jerry Jeudy would return value at ADP. Quinshon Judkins is interesting because he's steamed up, but he's starting to fall below Caleb Johnson in ADP. He's starting to fall into a range where Judkins, you're able to take him as like a high-end RB3. I worry a little bit about that offense working in multiple running backs. I think Dylan Sampson's pretty good, but Judkins is a guy who over the second half of the year could help you out as well if there's a little bit of quarterback consistency. So yeah, I'm with you. I think that it's a market inefficiency in fantasy football where these offenses completely left for dead often have a couple of guys who really, really beat ADP. You don't want to go all in. You don't want to draft all of them, but take some selective shots. If David Njoku is a target of yours, get some David Njoku. If Jerry Jeudy's a target of yours, Jerry Jeudy is like falling out of wide receiver 3 land right now.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Like Jerry Jeudy last year, people say, hey man, you don't watch football because it was all Jameis Winston. It wasn't all Jameis Winston. There was 3 quarterbacks who had double-digit target games for Jerry Jeudy, and the back end of the season, he was getting hyper targeted. He's getting paid a fortune in Cleveland, and they view him as their wide receiver 1. So Judy's interesting. Jeudy, I don't think he's going to win you leagues, but I'd be shocked if he doesn't return value at his current ADP.
What do we make of the Packers? It sounds like they want to run the ball more with Josh Jacobs this year. I can't figure out the wide receivers as it is. You just leave them alone, or what do we do here?
I just don't know how they can walk away from the way that season ended, where Philadelphia manhandled them and Jordan Love had all those turnovers in the NFL playoffs against Philly, and they scored 10 points as a team without getting a little bit back towards the balance that we saw in the LaFleur years heading into last year. And I think a lot of it was out of necessity last year, where the second half of the year, the offense just wasn't functioning. They went to that super ground heavy approach, tons and tons of Josh Jacobs. I think if they're going to make a run in the NFC and do better than they did last year, they've got to get back to balance. I think it's worth taking shots at the wide receiver spot in Green Bay. Jaden Reed makes some sense. It's sort of a post-type sleeper. The guy was great as a rookie, and that was a lot of those games where when Aaron Jones was out, they used him on a lot of those manufactured running plays. If we could get a little bit of consistency out of Reed, Reed's just a really explosive player where we've seen a bunch of spike weeks, and it's kind of hard to trust him, but you're able to get him in like the 8th round right now. So it's a really low cost bet to make. And I don't mind taking shots on Matthew Golden as well, because he's very cheap. And a lot of people didn't like the prospect profile for Golden, but Golden had 2 phenomenal games last year to end the year. I think he was playing his best football towards the end of the season. You're wearing the Georgia hat. He's pretty good against your Bulldogs in that SEC championship game. And then obviously was fantastic against Arizona State in the college football playoff. So for me, Golden's just sort of been left for dead by some as a, hey, he just runs fast kind of guy. That's not how we saw him when he was playing for Texas. So I think there's ranges of outcomes for both of those wide receivers. And if you don't like those wide receivers, then take a shot on Tucker Kraft, because Tucker Kraft you can get as a tight end 13, tight end 14. He could end up leading them in targets. And one of the easiest ways to get tight end production in fantasy football is just bet on tight ends who can lead their team in targets or be the number 2. Guys will give you all sorts of complicated ways to play the tight end position, but that's really what it comes down to. And Tucker Kraft, I think, has yak ability, and he's surrounded by wide receivers that are a little bit uninspiring in terms of, can these guys be a real one? So I think just based on how cheap these Green Bay receivers are, taking a shot on one of them, making a bet on one of them in your draft in rounds 8, 9, 10 in home leagues, you could end up getting a big return on your investment in ranges of the draft where guys aren't necessarily producing. And Josh Jacobs is interesting for me because it's a bet on huge volume. I just haven't been able to click the button as much at the 2-3 turn when he's moved this much up. It feels like we're kind of paying for last year's fantasy scoring numbers when it comes to Jacobs. I'm just not that excited about him this year. I think he's okay. I don't think he's going to kill your draft, but I don't think he's a league winner in that range.
Just in general, not necessarily in fantasy. Are you a Jordan Love guy?
I loved what we saw out of Jordan Love his first year as the starter there. I think that, is he closer to that, or is he closer to what we saw last year with all the turnovers? I'm not sure. But I think if you're capable of putting up a top 6 fantasy season where he had a ton of touchdown passes, he had production as a runner, and last year, I don't know if the season would have been as bad if that Brazil game didn't happen and he didn't get injured that first game. So I don't think the story's been fully written about Jordan Love. We also saw Jordan Love go into Dallas and rip the Cowboys to shreds in his first NFL playoff game and nearly had the San Francisco 49ers beat. So Jordan Love's shown us enough that he can be talented. The sample size isn't large enough that we can write the full picture on him. But like we talked about those 3 quarterback builds, I haven't minded having some Jordan Love in my best ball exposure this year because of what we saw in 2023. He was really good in 2023. So a lot of people want to, kind of go back and remind themselves, just watch that Dallas game. Jordan Love was looking great. Aaron Jones was looking great too, but Jordan Love was also looking great.
All right, this is a Commanders podcast. Who do we like for the Commanders in fantasy this year? Obviously, quarterback.
I've said in my podcast that I think this could be Jaden Daniels, could be the MVP in the NFL this year. And I think that transcendent year 2 quarterbacks, we have a history of this. We saw Patrick Mahomes year 2 in Kansas City win the NFL MVP, finish as the QB1 overall in fantasy. Lamar Jackson year 2 in Baltimore, won the MVP, finished as a QB1 overall in fantasy. Why can't Jaden Daniels be the next one? He's a threat to lead all quarterbacks in rushing production. It was the first year for him with the offensive coordinator. I think the continuity there with Cliff Kingsbury is good. I love what the Commanders did on the offensive line this offseason. Jaden Daniels was able to accomplish all that last year with sort of a very middling offensive line that sort of punched above their weight class. Now they have some real players in there, and the big investment Washington made. I also think that the Deebo Samuel addition was underrated because the Commanders had absolutely nothing in terms of yards after the catch last year. With Deebo, even if Deebo's about what he was last year, he's still going to make a huge contribution with the yak ability there, and he's an upgrade at the wide receiver 2 spot. The McLaurin thing, I think they'll work things out. I think it's kind of, they've got to come to a middle ground here. Obviously, if McLaurin misses some time, that's not great, but McLaurin, I think, understands that he's going to be a Commander for life, and that obviously he meshed very well with Jaden Daniels. So Jaden Daniels is the guy there. McLaurin's been kind of a tough click for me. On teams that I have Jaden Daniels, I've liked to kind of push in McLaurin. On teams where I don't have Jaden Daniels, I haven't been drafting much McLaurin. It's a little bit more of a structural pick for me this year. In Dynasty, I've taken some bets on Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt.
Good for you.
Because I think he's nasty. And I think that if you, we've heard that the Commanders want more explosive runs. That's not Austin Eckler. And that's not really Brian Robinson. So Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Shrine Bowl MVP, didn't have any big college exposure because he wasn't healthy at Arizona. But at New Mexico, he had like 18 touchdowns. And the JCM Hive is buzzing right now because they think they might end up with a direct handcuff. And the Commanders last year were 4th in the NFL in rushing yardage. So it just seems like you want to make these kind of low-cost bets to get exposure to a player like JCM. Brian Robinson's been fine. I don't think Brian Robinson is gonna crush you. And if you're in a zero RB build and you need somebody to start at running back for the first 6 weeks of the season, Robinson's fine, but he's never been a guy that's really elevated things. I think JCM could get his opportunities there, and he costs you nothing. He's in my zero and hero RB target list, and he's going in round 17 in leagues like the FFPC, NFFC. In home leagues, you could take him in your last round. And if the preseason doesn't go well for him, just cut him. You can add somebody on the waiver wire. I think JCM will know a lot about in the preseason. And I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't have a really big game or two in the preseason and make people open up their eyes and say, this is the guy. We need to get him some touches. And once that sort of door opens up for a player like that, all it takes is a Brian Robinson injury, and JCM could be in our fantasy lineups at least for a couple weeks of the year, and he's free.
I've been on the record many times. I think JCM leads the room in touches somewhere by the middle of the season. You're right. They spent too much time last year starting at the 5-yard line and, begging for fourth down conversions to score touchdowns. They need more explosion, and that's what they went out and did this year. At ADP for Zach Ertz, 91 targets last year and 7 touchdowns. It kind of feels like stealing at the value he's at.
Yeah, I think Ertz is fine. I think he's a structural pick where you're going to get tight end production out of him. He doesn't have the upside, though, for me. I like chasing upside at the tight end spot, but if he's your tight end 2 in best ball, or if you have Jaden Daniels, I've actually liked in deeper best ball formats double tapping Ertz with Ben Sinnott and just sort of see what happens with him this year. Sinnott is being sort of left for dead. Not every tight end hits as a rookie. So Ertz is easily the best bet to make in the tight end room, but Sinnott was a big time athlete. I think at least if you're a dynasty manager, it's worth rostering Ben Sinnott, kind of see where things go. And we could be completely wrong on Sinnott, but again, he's dirt cheap right now. Ertz is fine though. Ertz, that's Kingsbury's guy. Anytime Ertz is healthy, there's going to be some targets for him. But I do think Debo's presence sort of hurts him, where Debo's the going to be the number 2 guy in the offense, and that hurts Zach Ertz a little bit, where Ertz was the number 2 target, the most productive guy besides McLaurin last year, and I think that goes away a little bit. But Ertz is fine. He's going to get usage. Is he going to give you a top 10 tight end finish? I don't think so, but I think he's going to probably be right around tight end 15 for most of the year.
All right, I went on to football, guys. We'll wrap up with this little segment I like to do here. I picked up the ADPs, and I'll ask you which one you prefer at cost.
Sure.
So, A-Chain at 15 or Cook at 38?
A-Chain at 15.
Jonnu Smith is out. Big workload for him. That's why.
Yeah,
you're not a Cook.
I think A-Chan's. I just think A-Chan's awesome, and I think A-Chan could catch 100 passes this year. And like you said, the Jonnu Smith being out, it's huge for all the pass catchers and all the skill position players in Miami. But A-Chan was averaged 6 catches a game last year in games where Tua Tagovailoa was healthy. And A-Chan was like 22 points per game in games where Tua was healthy. A-Chan, I think, is a first-round value that you're getting in the second round. I think I'm a huge Devon A-Chan guy. That's my guy.
Kittle at 40 or Kelsey at 80?
Kittle at 40.
Is Kittle the most undervalued player in fantasy right now?
I think he might be. I think Kittle could be 17 points per game, and it's maybe the worst wide receiver target competition that he's ever had in San Francisco. You really have to go back to the late, the pre-2020 George Kittle years. They gave him a lot of money, and I've always kind of said this on a number of podcasts where Kittle hasn't had a season with more than 95 targets since like 2018. This could be the year because of just who's around him. And does he get to absorb some of those manufactured Debo looks? Usually people say, we're going to get some of those touches to Pearsall. Maybe McCaffrey gets some of those touches. But what if San Francisco just self-scouts and says, we want to get Kittle 120 targets, 115 targets this year. He's just so efficient, had over 1,100 receiving yards last year. They just gave him a big contract extension. And I love Bowers. I love McBride. But with Kittle, you're getting a discount. You're drafting him as tight end 3, but he could finish as the tight end 1. I think Kittle's an awesome value this year. Kelsey, it's sort of, I think that the fact that the wide receivers are going to be so effective in Kansas City this year, Kelsey could have a big drop off this year, and he also has looked like he's a little bit cooked. When Rashee Rice is healthy, and you got to think Xavier Worthy is going to get manufactured looks, Kelsey sort of becomes the third fiddle in that offense. I'm not that excited about him this year.
Burrow at 43 or Kyler Murray at 89?
That's a really good one. I'll say Burrow at 43 because I think Burrow, the ceiling outcome for both of these guys, Kyler Murray, I think could give you a quarterback 6 season. The ceiling outcome for Joe Burrow is he's Peyton Manning in his prime and he has 50 touchdown passes.
Last one, Garrett Wilson at 29 or Travis Hunter at 62?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I will go Garrett Wilson because I think Garrett Wilson's going to lead the NFL in target share. I don't know about targets, but target share, I think he's going to be going crazy. I think Justin Fields, they're going to see a lot of RPO and a lot of looks for Garrett Wilson. You got the locker room narrative, the reunion for the Ohio State guys. Garrett Wilson's sort of a post-hype guy this year. We talked about Ben Johnson. You got Tanner Angstrand there. That offense could be aggressive, and that offense could sort of beat ADP expectations with Justin Fields, Garrett Wilson, and Breece Hall if it's all clicking.
Theo, this was great, man. I appreciate you coming on today. We'll have to do this again. Thank you.
For sure.